And we're live.
We're live in the Rechangout, hashtag Rechangout. If you have any questions, please send them by Twitter or Google+. We've got Alan Whitford hosting.
Thank you, Louis. Our theme is basically what's keeping you awake at night, what are the technology problems you've had, and pretty much it's what we've been talking about throughout the day at various speed dating sessions, the sessions we've had at the tables, in the workshops. So it's going to be a little bit strange, folks, because we're all live on camera broadcasting to the world, so somebody's probably sitting in the back room watching us rather than getting close. So if you do have a question, raise your hand and kind of say it loud enough, and then I'll try and repeat it for you. If you're really brave, you could come over and sit in front of a laptop, and then you, too, could be broadcasting to the world. But why don't we start out with the first thing, I guess, is who here actually wanted to buy a CRM before they came today? Anybody? That's bad news for all you guys, isn't it, Louis, I'm afraid? A lot of the questions we had when we looked at the sheet were, how do I get more out of my CRM? And Lisa, I mean, you ran some sessions on that. When you talk to people, how do you recommend that they get the best out of the CRM they've already got?
Just having this debate actually about sometimes you need to look at what you've already got and probably fall in love with it again as much as you can fall in love with tech. I don't have a room in my house with loads of tech that I lock myself in. But I think sometimes it's a matter of looking at what your process is and then just going back to basics. If the process that you've got once you've bought your system has changed, then you obviously need to look at whether or not the system you've got needs adapting or whether or not you simply need to buy a new system. The recruitment process really, certainly since I've been in recruitment in the last 15 years, hasn't really changed. We still advertise in the same way, God forbid, whole different webinar. We still probably, well, we certainly don't source in the same way. It's a lot more technical than it used to be. But I do think the recruitment process is still relatively similar to what it was 14 years ago in terms of the kinds of people that you need to put together. But the systems have changed magically in some instances, and I just don't think there's probably enough respect for what the process could now be. It's a bit of a long-winded answer.
Sorry, we need to unmute because we're having a little bit of a time lag here. Not a problem. Thank you for that, Lisa. Anybody have a question from the audience? What are you doing to get the best out of your CRMs? Anybody have a hot tool or a hot tip that they want to share with us that we can then broadcast to the audience? Got a lot of very quiet, unbrave people here. What about, are you using your CRM to source candidates? And we had a debate at our table that basically nobody does. And Martin, at the same time, you were having a debate about where can I go actually source candidates other than their database? What sort of things were you discovering?
Okay, well, it was a kind of a crazy session, as in I don't recommend that we all look within match.com to look candidates, but the whole purpose of it is to not think out of the box, but not to have a box in the first place. The challenge at the moment is to find people that not everybody else is finding. And a lot of people are just using LinkedIn. They're searching in the same way, and they're not being very clever with their searches. So the whole point of the session was to look elsewhere. So we looked within sites like YouTube and your favorite, Alan, Skype. The whole thesis being that people give information about themselves in many, many other sites. So we should look within them. So that was the gist of it.
Well, one of the themes that seem to have come out through the conversation is that people want their system to be more tailorable, configurable, which I think is different than a lot of systems we've seen in the past. Mark, you've sit on both sides of the table. You've run a recruitment business. You got a technology platform. How important is this configurability to your customers? We'll take that back while Mark fixes the technology. Thank you very much for that. So, Lisa, do you want to pick up on that maybe? How important is configurability?
I think it's important, but I also think that too many people configure too much. And I think that what then happens, and the majority of the CRM projects we're working on right now, the client is now saying they just want to go vanilla. They just want to use the system as it comes out of the box, which in itself still needs a bit of configuration. you know, CRMs don't arrive in a box, you plug them in, everyone goes, thank God for that, we can get back to our day job. There still needs to be configuration, but I just think that sometimes, and I have been guilty of this, I used to be an IT director, I also used to be an adapt developer for my sins back in the day, before we really like playing with stuff, and I just think sometimes, any IT team in the room, Ben's in here somewhere as well. I always offend him. There you go, Ben. We really like tinkering and we really like playing, but I just think that sometimes when you buy a new system, you really need to look at what it can do rather than what you think you want it to do, because all you're doing is potentially creating a beast that eventually you're going to kick out of the company because it's so highly configured, even the company that sold it to you don't know what to do with it anymore. So I just think I would always err on the side of caution. We're working on quite a big project right now of an implementation where the client really does want to go vanilla. That's all they want. They just want it out of the box because they're suffering from spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on a system that is no longer fit for purpose. So I always err on the side of caution for that.
Thank you, Lisa. Now, one of the themes in the discussion tables, Shane, you were working on, which was automating recruitment to become a big biller. Now, is there anybody here in the room that doesn't want a big biller? No, apparently they all do want a big biller. So Shane, what was the theme of your conversation? What is the automation that makes a big biller?
Well, I was most interested in just looking at the different tools that were available to try and the whole world of social, and the emphasis on recruiters becoming social media experts, I think, is a little bit overhyped because there are so many tools out there that enable you to just automate the whole process. So, shock horror, and I was just sharing some information about that, and Stephen was at the table as well, and we were just comparing notes. So it was about looking at ways that you can wrap technology around the stuff that already works and do it smarter, more effectively, or just automate it completely so you don't have to do it at all. Is that a stunned silence?
That pretty much knocks us on our heads. I think another one of the things we saw right from the opening keynote today was about data. And although our opening speaker might have talked about, I think we might have just lost me, Louis. Yep. Oh, all right. About big data. To me, it's much more about the small data, about how you actually get things to really work. What's the data that really counts? Martin, you've had a lot of time looking at data. What's the difference between this big data, tons of stuff, or the small data that really makes a recruitment thing work?
Okay, well, you know, big data is a buzzword and everybody's scared of it, and you're right that everybody knows that big data is out there. So we've seen a load of tools, as Shane was talking about, which now amass, say, social media profiles, for example, for recruiters. So as more and more profiles appear, these tools appear. So stuff like Talent Bin and Intello and Dice create these aggregation tools that bring all the data into one place. And of course, as you say, everybody wants small data, but you have to start off with the big data first. So you know, I don't see many tools at the moment which are really utilizing big data properly. You know, everybody knows it's out there, but nobody's quite not sure what to do with it. And I guess the biggest bit of data most recruitment agencies have, which my agency was guilty of, was a database. You know, and what do people do? They go to LinkedIn and they've got a database. Well, you know, why don't you refresh your database to start off with? That's the best bit of data, which has cost you thousands of pounds to build. So look at that first, and then look at other big data tools.
Can I add something? A little baby case study. I was with a client yesterday. They're a 15-man recruiter with a resourcer, and they sent the resourcer basically off for a day to look for loads of data on a particular assignment. And the resourcer, I mean, you can obviously add up in your head how much a resourcer per day costing the business, because they're not a free resource. The resourcer came back with the most amazing list of names from all the places that they'd searched for, excluding the database, and the top 3 names were pulled out of this list that had been found across all of the different job boards, etc. And when the client then checked on their own database, they were there. So it's really something to think about. I think that the process doesn't exist yet for consultants to get their head around, and they're not given time to get their head around this big data concept. All big data is lots of places with data, and we need to think about how we can get that, because obviously at the moment, like you say, there isn't really kit, unless you're really in the IT sector, that links all of this stuff and aggregates it together. And even then, you're still having to then mop up from your own systems as well. And I'm looking forward to a day when that happens. And that's when we're going to have to start spending money on this stuff, isn't it? And rightly so, I think.
I've got a question for Mark.
Sorry. So is Mark, you're going to try and come in now?
The statistics sort of suggest that we actually communicate with less than 5% of our database as a recruitment agency. That's not just us in our business, but that's generally speaking. We're pretty poor at communicating and staying in touch and keeping it refreshed. So what technology do you guys recommend, or tactics do you recommend to try and keep that data more fresh? What's out there that you guys have come across?
Social CV is one I've come across, Bill Fisher, that apparent. I don't know what Louise Martin think about that product that refreshes databases.
Yeah, and it's kind of the big challenge, isn't it? So a lot of companies say, well, let's build a talent pool for future hires, and they get a load of data, they use a research company like mine, and then they get the data, and what do we do with it? How do we actually keep that fresh? And as Louis says, products like the social CV do it. I know of great big companies like Pepsi and Apple. What do they do with it? Well, they've got enough money to build semantic software in the middle which understands what a profile is. So they have a tactic of a 55-year-old project manager that does not want to be invited to a Facebook group, maybe, but maybe he needs an email per quarter. So they have different tactics based on the different demographics of the people within there. And there's other things like Brave New Talent, for example, which is a community site. It's all about talking to people. Whether they work 100% right, I don't know. I think the jury's out, but there is. Yeah, I mean, I don't. Lisa will know better what the functionality is within CRMs to do that. But, if you want to be broadcasting a load of job descriptions, not really. It's kind of, and I know the big techs and Apples have a policy of 80% content about fit within a company, and 20% is about a job, but only if the job is relevant and the right location and the right level.
Martin, sorry, I'll just come in quickly, Lisa. My thought on it is that you're maybe overcomplicating it with technology. I mean, if you get your monthly newsletter right and email marketing and the traditional approach, if you're not getting that bit right, then the technology isn't going to help. So it's about trying to be interesting. And if you're not good at being interesting, then don't try doing it on a big scale.
I think the attraction piece is absolutely implicit in our strategies right now, and every day I meet a client that says the way I'm going to refresh my database, I'm going to send an e-shot out to 28,000 candidates and ask them to send their CVs in. I'm not going to get many back, and I'm like, yeah, but the ones you do get back are probably not the ones you want, and then they're going to be saying to you, what are you going to do for me then, what are you going to do for me? And then all of a sudden consultants who are probably not very candidate rich or quality candidate rich have got a problem. I don't think a system exists out there yet that's going to allow us to keep our data super clean. I think the process is the thing that we need to go back to, and I think it's also about, I've got a client who's got 12 consultants, they've got 28,000 candidates on their CRM system. Really? I just think the recruitment market needs to figure out the average life cycle of a candidate in their sector, whether it be finance, automotive, and make some very difficult decisions about cutting it down and saying, if a candidate's on the system for more than 3 years, I'll find them elsewhere. And I'll keep my data and I'll turn it into an asset, something that's beautiful and shiny, a bit like the Pulp Fiction suitcase. You open it up and it's just glowing when you open it. That's what I think a CRM system should be capable of doing. I think the problem is there are too many CRM systems out there that think you should put everything on them. And I don't subscribe to that, because all you're doing is trying to create another company's house. And even company's house can't get it right. So why should you even try with 12 consultants?
We've got a question.
Yeah. All right, and we've got another question right here, sir.
Yeah, I just want to take it sort of back a step. As someone who's just about to enter the world as an independent recruiter, for a while as a recruiter, I've known where to go when I want to get new technologies, to be fair, or to get certain information that will help me find new candidates. Everyone's talking about big data and how to use big data, and to be honest, Rob Symes was the first person who said to me, or said to all of us, okay, this is how I now use that big data. So as a recruiter, where do I go to learn how to use all this data? Because it's great that there's resources out there that have the data, but how do I use it, and in what way do I use it, and where do I learn about this?
Okay, I'm going to put this question out as a bit of a refresh here. We're doing the Rec Hangout live from Rec Tech, the technology conference. We just brought in a question from the audience. Young gentleman here is a relatively new recruitment, new business. We've been talking about big data, and his real question is, so if I've got all this data, how do I actually learn how to use it to actually drive my business success? Would that be about fair?
And where do I go to find out how to use it?
Where do I go to find out how to use it? Who's going to teach me besides Rob Simons, who obviously wants to come and sell you his stuff? Mark, thoughts? Where are they going to find out how to use this big data? All right, we're going to go back to Martin Lee. We're dropping you in it once again. How is he going to find out how best to use this data?
Well, what do you mean by big data? I mean, you know, do you need big data if you're starting out as a small agency?
We'll take what we talked about, using data to predict ability and work out the probability of whether a sale can be closed or not, whether it's a client or not. Where are we going to how to find out who can use that data, where to get that data from? Because all I know about big data is the word big data. I've been told much more about it. Big data means all the data connecting to the rest of it. That's it. Big data is I don't find out about it. I don't see many people talking I've learned a lot about recruitment technologies and talking candidates over a lot of years, but less about what the scientists talk about, how we use data that is actually out there right in front of us.
Yeah, I think, Shane, you intelligence. Looking at intelligence of data as intelligence, talked about a little bit as well.
Okay, well, let me first address the issue that the last people you should pick up buzzwords from are IT people who design recruitment technology, as if there's any relationship between recruitment technology and recruitment. And I suppose that also addresses this thing about you should not be thinking, what's big data and what can it do for me? You should be thinking about, how am I going to be a good recruiter? That creates the problem. And big data, whatever big data happens to be, may or may not be the solution for you. But if you start with the recruitment problem and work from that point, it'll be more productive than starting with big data and trying to work out the application of it. Is that fair? Does anybody want to disagree with that one?
No, I think that's a fair answer. I mean, I think what Rob was trying to get to this morning too is about analytics. So a lot of our conversation today has been about, well, how do I just go find my candidate? But we're not asking the question, well, how do I determine which of those candidates that I have found are the most placeable? And which of those jobs that I have are the least fillable? Because we've all had jobs we know we're never going to fill in a million years, but that's the job that's on my desk. It's the one I got to work on. We've all had candidates that walk in the door, we go, I'm not doing anything else but work on this candidate. I'm going to place that person. They're eminently placeable. And we've had the other candidate which goes, well, that Whitford character, he's a no-hoper. We're never going to get him a job. But how do we have the data for that other than our gut feel? Because up to now, I think most of our recruitment businesses have been based on the gut feel. So how many of you are actually trying to do the analysis of the effectiveness of your ability to assess whether or not a job is fillable and to do it or not, and whether a candidate is placeable and to use them or not? Anybody? Anybody trying to really do that? Yep. So Mark, I mean, you're trying to work on that a little bit. How do you do that?
We just basically created our own internal assessment program, so that when a job comes in, we'll assess the client, the history, the nature of the job, relevant to the consultant that's received it, and basically just do some sensible analysis of whether or not that job is fillable, you know, so that we can determine whether or not we're going to take it on. If you're a good consultancy, you should become job rich quite quickly. You know, clients will like using you if you're good at what you do, and then the dilemma is, of course, is to choose the right jobs that you can fill, that you can most easily fill. But you've also got to manage the relationship around the jobs that you're not going to take on and you're not going to work. So, I mean, we just determined our own sort of score structure, and if a role isn't meeting that sort of score structure, then the consultant will be challenged to either go back to the client and talk to them before taking it on, or we won't actually sort of work on it.
Lisa, you want to add to that, Lisa?
Certainly when I've done some polls, and other people have just spoken to me generally, there's a 2 in 10 fill rate right now in the UK. Is anyone bettering that in here? No one's rushing to volunteer for a 50-50. I think what needs to happen in 2014 is we need to regain our confidence. We need to start saying no to more. We need to start spending more time on less vacancies for obvious reasons. And I think then the big data thing doesn't really matter anymore. It's just a, it's just a concept. The idea is there's just loads of stuff everywhere. We need to get our head around how to find it. What big data is a definition, and God help me if anyone technical is watching this and I stuff it up. Mute me now, is the idea of lots of data everywhere and the ability to predict from that data what's likely to happen. So healthcare, stuff like that. How can we use it in jobs and stuff? Maybe the trends of where people are likely. That big data on LinkedIn is pretty cool because you've got university pages and stuff like that, which allow us to see when we put our university data in where we're likely to end up. Really cool. That's really cool. If Alex is in here, will probably agree with me. I don't know where he's buggered off to. So I think it's about looking at what you've got, looking at how you can fill it. Any salesperson should do that. I think whether you're in recruitment or not, I think what's happened to the recruitment market is we're very frightened of saying no to stuff, and I think that's become a massive problem. And I'd like to get to the end of 2014 and more recruiters are saying, do you know what, I've made a partnership with another business that's better at doing that. Leave it with me and I'll give it to that person. And working better like that, because we're saturated with recruiters in the UK, and I would like to see more collaboration and less lip service. And more success, really.
I think that definition was about right for big data. But I mean, my question is big data really relevant to recruitment? I mean, the closest we probably get to the relevance of big data in recruitment is something like Broadbean's tool that allows you to search multiple databases in one go. Would you agree with that, Shane?
Separate out the concept of lots of data, which is more of a big problem than it is big data. Because if you've got lots of data and you want to get one little bit out of it, that's sourcing and searching. Whereas big data is more about the analysis of large amounts of information to determine trends and spot opportunities in the totality of that information rather than finding specific pieces of information. So I sort of agree, although I mean I know Martin, some of the stuff you do is very orientated with that, and some of the people earlier on were doing stuff that is real proper big data analysis. For most recruiters, big data is just a big problem of finding the little data within it.
Is it relevant? Is it relevant to recruiters? Is it relevant to the day-to-day recruiter? Does the recruitment business owner need to be considering how it uses big data? Because we brought the question, but I don't really feel like we've answered it.
It depends on the question you're looking for. I mean, it's the problem you're looking to solve. If you're looking for one candidate, probably not. If you're looking to see where the trends are within the marketplace or where the sweet spots are, yes.
I'll be honest with you, that question was very quiet, very open. It wasn't intended to be like that. It was off the back of what Rob was saying. I'm sure everyone's seen Rob's documentary before they came to this. He used the analogy of sports teams and how they use data to play to beat their opponents. It was just getting an idea of, as I said, to learn how I can use data to massive big and small, or just using data in general about, especially for me being an independent person who really, where I put my time is going to dictate how much effort it takes at the end of the day. Where I can use the data to give me the biggest competitive advantage. So, should I be using data to make sure that I know that candidate A, B, and C are more likely to get a job open? So, which one should I be putting more time into, or which client should I be putting more time to? There's an obvious fact to me as a recruiter that the relationship that is easy that way. But as Rob was talking this morning, using that data for predictability, like sports teams do as well, which is what you can tend to do a lot. So it was just a question to try and get more of a understanding about that really, and how I can stay independent and to give you a bit of an advantage, stay ahead of the curve.
Well, I think thank you very much for that. And I think one of the key things we've understood now is that it's not about data. What you're talking about is about information, and it's how I'm using the information to make informed decisions. And if you read Moneyball or watch the movie, I mean it's a little bit crazy, but they get a geeky guy and he actually analyzes performance of athletes every single minute of every single day, and then the manager has a book like this and he can tell, here's a kind of scenario, I know that's about what's going to happen. Now the thing about baseball is, by the way, a great baseball player only is successful 3 out of 10 times he's at bat, which is pretty much what a great recruiter is successful 3 out of 10 times.
Alan,
so
that's a blog. It's a blog.
It's a blog.
It's a blog.
I know, I can feel a blog coming. So I think we've almost killed the data point. We're going to do a final little reset. This is the Rec Hangout live from Louise Triance's Rec Technology event, RecNet. We've been asking the audience to engage in us in this debate. I'm sorry, what was your name, sir? Dan was very brave. He actually decided he would engage. One of the other things we talked a little bit about was sourcing and using social media. Didn't seem to get talked about as much today as I thought it might have. How about any of the audience? Anybody have questions on what they should have been doing with social media? And Dave's hiding because I know he wants to talk about mobile, but he wouldn't go online to talk about it. Anybody want to talk about social? Anybody care about social? It's the new channel. Anybody? Question about it? All right, so mobile Dave asked the question, does social work if you don't have mobile?
Well, none of us are using mobiles now, Dave. Just going to hide my mobile phone.
All right, I think we'll get close to reset. It's been a great experiment. Let's just do one whip around the table from the audience. Sorry, from our panel. What was your sort of one takeaway from today, Mark?
Beers I wasn't here most of the day. I was hoping to find something today that would give me an insight into a new piece of technology, something that's going to change the way that we work, something that we could take back to the business. So I'm going to put that question back to you guys. You know, did any of you pick up anything today? Did you see anything today that you think is going to change the way that we recruit?
Lisa, what do you think? Lisa, what do you think?
No, is the answer. I'm genuinely not normally controversial. I normally get very giddy at tech events, but no, I look forward to a day where I can start mucking about with tech at an event like this and seeing some new stuff and hearing roadmaps. But no doubt, and understandably so, the people in the room want to reserve that for their own environments and their own big conferences. But today's like the kind of day to dazzle people and get your posh knickers on, really. And I'm not sure I saw that. But what I did see, and this is absolutely implicit, is people like us look at tech all day. So impressing it is actually a little bit difficult, isn't it? If you're looking to buy a new piece of tech, or you just want to get your head around it, and most importantly, you want to have a bit of a beauty parade, fantastic. There's lots of, you know, I did this event 3 or 4 years ago, and there were big and little streams in the room. Today, it's evening out very nicely. It's really nice to compare. I think the main takeaway for me is this. Let me show. Anybody on video now? I'm going to wear this every day when I wake my children up at 6 o'clock and tell them to get out of bed and get themselves sorted.
Thank you, Lisa. Louis, we'll come back to you at the end for the final wrapping as well. Martin, I'm going to ask you the question, maybe the reverse, not necessarily what was your takeaway from today, but what's your giveaway from today? You know, that lesson that you try to get across in your afternoon session, what's the one lesson you want to give people out there?
Okay, well, thanks. I just thought of my answer for the first question, but so I think my giveaway was my session was on looking for people in different places. And I'm going to stick with the theme of the fact that there are more jobs than candidates right now, and people need to do things in a different way. They need to search in a different way, and they need to engage candidates in a different way. Sending an email to candidates with a job description, are you interested, is just not good enough anymore. And people need to be a bit more innovative, and they need to be a bit more personal, and they need to be looking in sites and doing things and searching in a different way. And if their recruiters don't know how to do this, they should be upskilling them. They should be training them on how to do this, because otherwise they're going to lose.
Thank you, Martin. Shane, you've been in a session. You've been around some of the other sessions. I'll go back the other way now. What was your takeaway then?
Takeaway. It's great to be here, and it's great to see so many friendly faces and both competitors and everybody else in the industry. Recruitment still seems to be as hard as ever, and all of us in the technology side of it are endeavouring to make it easier and probably making it more difficult, and so keeping us all gainfully employed in the near future. So yeah, the future's bright. Recruitment is still difficult. We all are still employed.
And Louis, you wore a couple different hats today. Besides being the man of the hour on the Rec Hangout, you also presented in the 2-minute speed chat. What for colleague? What was your takeaway today?
I think what we're seeing more and more is, of course, all of the CRMs have come from being databases for data storage, and really what we want to look at and what recruiters are beginning to ask for is how can a database help you develop relationships, and what information and data can it provide you to be able to engage more intimately with clients and candidates beyond just offering jobs or finding and sourcing people. And what information it can take from the online big data sphere and bring into sort of enable conversations. and that was important. I think the other aspect is how recruitment agencies can use that data to provide an extra service, do talent mapping, provide analytics to their clients. There was, as I mentioned earlier, Acre Resources. I was impressed by them yesterday at another event, and that they provide talent mapping information to all of their clients, as an extra service. So they're using their data and to more than just storage and a process device. So that was the key takeaway. Yeah.
Thank you, Louis. Yeah, we'll get close to wrap up. I'm going to just say I think it was great for everybody to be active and participate today, all the vendors as well as our delegates. A couple key phrases I think that came out, speed dating. One, for all you vendors, you price your product as pocket friendly. I said you were going to use that, Ms. Zoho. Thank you. And the other one was that when you're building content in your website, you've got to make sure you've got some hero content that actually makes your site more attractive and more interesting to people than just the boring old stuff that we normally do. So a couple good takeaways there. I think the other thing, as we've seen from a plethora of recruitment events this week, is our industry is healthy. It's growing. There's money to be made out here for all of us, so it's a great time to be in recruitment. So thank you all for joining. Louis, a little wrap up. What do we need to do? Are we back on normal schedule in 2 weeks' time?
We're back in 2 weeks. I think the topic is how should recruiters be using search engines to attract candidates? That's the topic. And that's on the 18th of June, 1 p.m. GMT.
Brilliant, Louis. Thank you. And I guess
was I unmuted? Yes, I was.
From Starship Louise, because it kind of feels a bit like we're on the duck here of the Starship. Thank you all, and it's been a great time. And if we want, we're going to keep talking. We're all still here. We'll just go offline now. Thank you.